focus for a few minutes on another story that was making the news last week, and that was about this gang of cyber criminals who published sensitive patient data from an NHS blood testing company. This happened on Thursday, and then went on to cause huge disruption to multiple hospitals in London.
Yeah, it was on the 3rd of June that a cyber attack was perpetrated against Synovis, an NHS provider, which processes blood tests on behalf of a number of NHS organisations. In the first week of the attack, over 1,000 operations and appointments needed to be rearranged across the two most affected trusts. That was King's College Hospital and Guy's and St Thomas's. Overnight on Thursday, the hackers shared private patient information on their darknet site. A sample of the data seen by the BBC includes patient names, dates of birth and descriptions of blood tests. And we can talk now to Ciaran Martin, who's founder of the National Cyber Security Centre and professor at the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University. Good morning to you, Ciaran.
Good morning.
First of all, if I was a patient whose data had been published, even though it's on the dark web, I would be concerned. How worried should I be?
Not as worried, sadly, as those who've had patient care disrupted. As you've said, there are two issues going on here. There's the attack of the 3rd of June that has led to weeks of disruption, more than 1,000 operations cancelled, 200 of which have been related to cancer. So that's extremely serious. That impact is probably one of the most, if not the most significant and impactful cyber incidents ever seen in the UK. The data is a slightly different issue. It's still serious, but I'm afraid the damage was also done on the 3rd of June. So what the hackers try to do is extort money out of the victims in two ways. One is by locking them out and demanding money for a key to let you back into the network. But the other is by trying to extort you with a threat to publish the data if you don't pay. This works slightly differently. The data's gone and the criminals are going to use it anyway. We know from policing operations against these types of hackers that even if you pay them, they keep the data. They try and use it for scams and so on. So what happened on Thursday and Friday with the publication of the data, it's painful, it's disturbing, but actually experience shows that relatively little additional harm is done by publishing the data on these obscure sites. So if you are somebody affected, you will get notified in due course once they've established that you've definitely had your data breached. And then what you should do is go on the National Cybersecurity Centre's website, look at the things to watch out for, the suspicious activity, the suspicious approaches that might use that information, and look at the advice about how to protect your devices and so on.
Yeah, so have extra guards up against any kind of scams, particularly any related to medical issues. So I would imagine then, after this came to light, NHS IT managers throughout the country went into kind of major panic mode or major safety mode to ensure that all their systems are in place. But how vulnerable are NHS IT systems in general to this kind of attack?
I think it's a really important issue, and I think you're right that just as when 7 years ago, again during an election campaign where there was an attack that affected the NHS, this was a different source of an attack. It was a North Korean state attack that went badly wrong and affected millions of networks all over the world, including the NHS. There was a really hard look at where there was out-of-date software and so on. In this case, I think what's most significant is trying to find those single points of failure where, as in this case, the withdrawal of blood testing services has led to serious disruption of healthcare provision. And I think we have to be really smart about this. If you take something like aviation, no one gets on a plane thinking that if the computer system goes down, either by accident or because it's hacked, that's the end of the story and the plane can't land. There are backup ways of doing these things. In something like healthcare, it's more complicated. Where's this one IT systems that mean that if you lose it, you can't do operations? Well, we know about one because it's just been revealed. Where are the others? That's the really sort of significant point here. And again, this is why the data, serious though it is a sort of secondary issue. I think if you said to most people, look, you've got two bad outcomes. Number one, a potentially life-saving or life-improving operation is going to be cancelled. Or number two, there's going to be some data, floating around some pretty nasty parts of the dark web. Most people, if they had to choose one of those two bad outcomes, would go for the second one. So the really serious issue here is about our ability to sustain health services.
Ciaran, thank you so much. That's really informative. Ciaran Martin, who's Professor at Oxford University. And actually, these kinds of scams much more, or data hacks, much more common in the United States, targeting private healthcare companies because they can be very, very lucrative. So, yeah, real concern.